Okay, all right.
Mhm. So Steph, if you want to let us know when we're live.
Chair Doherty, you're live now.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Standing Committee and members of the public. This is the Standing Committee for the Development and Operations. And we believe we have the Deputy Mayor joining us in a few minutes, so we will get started. To begin, I will undertake the Land Acknowledgement. Today, we acknowledge that Collingwood is located on the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, including traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe peoples, and on lands connected with the Lake Simcoe Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818. This is the home of a diverse range of Indigenous peoples whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors of our society. And as you know, everyone, this is also Black History Month. And to recognize that, we will feature some of our, some histories of some of our notable contributors to Black history in this country. And this afternoon, we'll recognize Rosemary Brown, who lived from 1930 to 2003. And her famous quote was, "We must open the doors and we must see to it that they remain open so that others can pass through." Rosemary Brown was the first Black female member of a provincial legislature and the first woman to run for the leadership of a federal party. She was a politician, social worker, feminist, writer, educator, mother, and activist. As a young woman of color, Rosemary navigated circumstances of racism and sexism, which fueled her drive for change, challenging roles and assumptions on race and gender as a politician. After retiring from politics, she served as the head of the Ontario Human Rights Commission and Match International Women's Fund. In honor of her exceptional life, Rosemary Brown has received national and international distinctions, including the Order of Canada and the United Nations Human Rights Fellowship. Okay, so I will be looking now for a mover and seconder for the adoption of the agenda. Councillor Jeffrey move, Mayor Saunderson second, all in favor? And that is carried. And our next item of business for this meeting is an election of chair and vice chair for this year. So I will turn the meeting over to the deputy clerk.
Thank you, Chair Doherty. So before we begin the election process, I'll just give a brief overview of the election process that we'll be doing this evening. I'll first call for nominations. A member may nominate another member or themselves, and a nomination does not require a seconder. And I will continue to call for nominations until there are no further nominations put onto the floor, and will confirm with each nominee that they wish their name to stand. I will then ask each nominee in order of the nominations to briefly explain why they're interested in the position of chair or vice chair. And after each nomination has spoken, I will call the vote for the nominees based on the order in which they were nominated. First member receiving majority vote will be elected as chair or vice chair. If only one person is nominated and the nominee accepts, the individual will be acclaimed to the position and no vote is required. So to start off, I will now call the question, are there any nominations for the position of chair for the Development and Operations Services Standing Committee? Councillor Doherty?
I will nominate Vice Chair Hamlin.
Okay. Okay, I'll call for a second time if there's any nominations for the position of chair. Calling for the third time. Right, seeing that there are no other nominations, Councillor Hamlin, do you accept the position as chair for the standing committee?
Yes, I do.
Okay, therefore, Councillor Hamlin is acclaimed to be the chair of the Development and Operations Standing Committee. Let's now move on to the position of vice chair, and I'll call for nominations for anyone wishing to fill the position of vice chair. Councillor Hamlin?
I would nominate Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Deputy Mayor Hall?
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey.
And I'll call one more time. Are there any other nominations? Okay. So I'll start with Councillor Doherty. Do you accept the nomination for vice chair?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And Councillor Jeffrey, do you accept the nomination for vice chair?
Yes, I do.
All right. So because Councillor Doherty was nominated first, I'll get you to start first. Councillor Doherty, if you just want to give a brief explanation of why you're interested in the vice chair position, and then we'll call for a vote for that nomination.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to have been chair of this committee and to have been member of this committee now since 2018. Development and operations are such an important part of our operations as a municipality. And I find it personally very rewarding to be on this committee. And I hope that my contributions reflect that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Jeffrey, if you want to give a brief explanation on why you're interested in the position for vice chair.
Oh, thank you very much, Deputy Clerk. I have chaired previously, and I do value all of the important work that we do at this committee. And I would very much like to assist the chair as vice chair.
All right. So with both of you being able to speak to your position, your nominations, I'll call the question for the nomination of Councillor Doherty for vice chair first. All those in favor, please raise your yes cards. And all those opposed, please raise your no cards. Okay, so that was defeated. I guess we'll still call the election for Councillor Jeffrey as vice chair. So all those in favor of Councillor Jeffrey. Okay, and all those opposed. Okay, all right. So Councillor Jeffrey, welcome. You're appointed as vice chair to the Development and Operations Standing Committee.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And then as the elections are now over, I will now ask our chair, Chair Hamlin, to take over the meeting as chair.
Thank you very much, Deputy Clerk Dahl. So the first item on the agenda following the election are declarations of pecuniary interest. So if any committee member has such a pecuniary interest on any item on the agenda tonight, could they please identify it now? And of course, if any item comes up during the course of this evening where you feel there is a conflict, please announce it at that time. The next item is business arising from the previous meeting. Are there any items anyone on the committee would like to discuss from a previous meeting? Seeing none? Oh, no, seeing none. Staff reports. The first staff report is P 2021-02-222 Hurontario Street, conditional site plan approval, Sporting Life. I would ask Director Farr if he could please provide an introduction to the staff report. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. I think there's a presentation. Thanks, Becky. This is a site plan, a conditional site plan recommendation for the property at 222 Hurontario Street. That's the site that most people know as the former location of Sporting Life, the site of a fire just a little over a year ago. The applicant has filed a new site plan application for the property. And we're working with them closely to try to get the project building permit ready for the beginning of March. So in this case, this report is recommending that council provide conditional site plan approval, and the conditions would delegate to the director of planning a number of matters to be resolved, and then staff would finalize the site plan agreement and forward it to the mayor and clerk for execution. Next slide, please. So this is an interesting project insofar as when the owner has rebuilt or is seeking to rebuild the site, they have been able to work with their insurance company to bring the building on the site into compliance with many of the policies and bylaws that apply to development in the downtown area. So the effect of that generally is to bring the building closer to Hurontario Street. And also this development contemplates closing the lane off Hurontario Street that went west to the parking lot at the rear. That lane could be closed because, of course, that parking lot's accessed off 4th Street. So in closing the lane, they're able to expand the building to the south as well and create a pedestrian access from the rear parking lot through to Hurontario. And in doing this, as I said, the building achieves greater compliance with a downtown heritage district bylaw and our related preferences, policy preferences. Next slide, please. So this project has been reviewed by the Heritage Committee, and it's also been designed by the architectural firm of Reich and Petch, which is a pretty prestigious architectural firm. They are the architectural firm that has the Massey Hall reconstruction project. So they've been an interesting group to work with. And the applicant, in this case, the property owner, has a focus here on replacing the building for commercial development purposes. So what you're seeing here, and you can kind of capture it in the image at the bottom of the screen, is they're creating it still a single story structure, but it's a single story plus that will match the height of the 2-story building to the north. And it's in kind of a heritage warehouse style. So as I indicated, this would require a heritage permit, and the Heritage Committee signaled its support for the project. Next slide, please. This is the rear of the building. Next slide, please. Looks like that's it. So in any case, there are a number of small matters left in the site plan that have to be resolved. And I just want to point this out that in order for a conditional building permit to be sought, we need to confirm that the building structure is sound, that there's not going to be any significant changes to this building at this point. And in fact, that's the point we're at in the site plan review. There's some minor landscaping details to be sorted out on the property and a few other minor matters, and we're actually clearing those issues as we speak. So we would expect to provide a minor addendum to the report when it comes to council, just outlining what the remaining conditions are. And then our aim would be to facilitate them getting their building permit early in March. And you would see this be reoccupied by Sporting Life, which is a company is quite excited to return to the Collingwood market. So that's my presentation. I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Are there any questions or comments from the public before the committee considers this report?
Through the chair, we do have Matthew Pretty on the line who's wishing to speak to the staff report. So I'll just let him in. Just give me a sec.
Thank you.
So Matthew, you should be good to go here.
Okay. Yeah, just looking at this file here, the design looks really good. I just want to apologize. I wish Tina Comey, Councillor Comey, and Sonia, CAO Sonia Skinner, well. reviewing the last comment there. You guys, the meetings go so long, so I'm just going to try and be a little bit more brief here. You know, that was a horrendous fire there, as well as the diner downtown. Could we ask the director of planning, do we have any information about the fire? Was it a criminal? Was it accident? You know, do we have an arsonist running around town that we all need to be careful about? And did we get to the bottom of that structural fire? It's very concerning to think there could be someone running around there setting fire to old buildings. Thank you.
Director Farr, do you want to take a stab at that last question?
Sure, through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Pretty. I don't have any information about that, and the fire chief has worked quite closely with this in the reconstruction review, or at least the development file review. This was an intensely emotional experience for all the workers and the property owner and the business that was there. That's just my general understanding of it, but I'm not aware of any criminal related matters associated with this.
Mayor Saunderson?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The fire was not arson. That was deemed to be an issue, I think, with the HVAC system and the insulation and the design of the roof. Director Farr is absolutely right. It was a very emotional fire, but there was no wrongdoing. It was accidental.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public? Oh, Councillor Doherty? You're on mute. Yeah.
My apologies. I didn't realize you were still with the public, so we'll let everyone have a say.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Clerk, are there any other members of the public?
I'll just ask if anyone else in the attendees list wishes to speak. If you could please raise your hand. And it doesn't appear that there's anyone else wishing to speak to this item at this time.
Okay, and what I'll do at this point is I'll read in the recommendation and motion that staff report P 2021-02-222 Hurontario Street conditional site plan approval Sporting Life be received, and that council approve the site plan development drawings for the proposed Sporting Life retail commercial establishment municipally addressed as 222 Hurontario Street, subject to the following conditions. Receipt of the following material and resolution of related matters to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning and Building Services within 1 year of the date of this approval. And that would be response of any outstanding matters within the first submission comments dated January 15, 2021, provision of required securities and fees, and 5 sets of final drawings for signature. The second condition, resolution of any related matters is deemed appropriate to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning and Building Services. And further that, subject to fulfillment of the conditions of approval to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning and Building Services, the related authorization bylaw to execute the site plan control agreement for redevelopment of a retail commercial establishment, being Sporting Life at 222 Hurontario Street, be enacted. Could I ask for a mover and then a seconder for this staff report? Mover, Deputy Mayor Hall, seconder, Councillor Doherty. And could I hear from anyone on the standing committee with comments? And Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Chair. I'll begin by saying that it's so wonderful to know that Sporting Life are coming back to our downtown. They were a very important anchor at that end of the Main Street, and they will be very welcome back. I'll also say that I find the design to be very attractive, very well done, very sympathetic with the heritage character of the rest of downtown without being Disneyfied. That said, it is proposed to be a single-story structure, and I'm just wondering through you to Director Farr, has the opportunity to add a second story to this building with the notion of perhaps offering multiple uses in the building. So perhaps residential on the above floor and retail on the bottom. Has that been discussed or considered by the applicant?
Director Farr?
Through you, Madam Chair, Councillor Doherty. Yes, we've discussed this with the applicant, encourage them to consider that option. They're primarily a commercial landlord, and their business model is geared in that direction. And so they're not able to pursue that direction as part of their business plan.
Okay, thank you. Has there been any consideration, perhaps because this is a flat roof structure, has there been consideration to the installation of a green roof on the building?
Director Farr?
Through you, Madam Chair, Councillor Doherty, we haven't discussed a green roof with the applicant. It would have an impact, it's likely on some aspects of building construction. I should note that the builder has pursued an expansion of the building to try to achieve some of the policy objectives that the town has, and that they've done that of their own volition, I mean, in consultation with us. And so they've gone farther than they might have needed to, an effort to try to improve the quality of the development. But green roofs is not something that we have discussed with them.
Councillor Doherty, is there any follow-up? You're on mute.
No, thank you. I apologize for that interruption. As we proceed through our final review of our official plan, I hope that we will be able to take the opportunity to encourage our all of our commercial and retail applicants to consider multi-use wherever possible. It certainly ticks off so many boxes for the town. And also implementation of some of these unique and green initiatives having to do with new building construction. There may even be some opportunities for funding available from provincial or federal government that we could encourage new applicants to tap into to achieve these goals. But other than that, I'm personally am delighted, and those are my comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else? Deputy Mayor Hall?
Thank you. Through your chair to our director, Director Farr. I guess I'd just like to preface by saying that I too share the comments of Councillor Doherty in terms of long-term looking at infill development or new applicants, etc. I'm speculating when I say this that the design scope and costing was probably within the parameters of the insurance payout for the fire itself, and therefore limited in terms of maybe what they could do at the site. That said, really pleased when I saw the first renderings that they've come forward to align with the adjacent building and eliminating that lane to the south of the building. I think that with 4th Street to the south, with the gas station with 2 entries, one on Hurontario, one on 4th, with a bus stop at that corner, it's quite congested. And I think just from a public safety standpoint, it's not only aesthetically is it a pleasing design, but it's a good use of public space in the public interest. I don't know if this question is applicable in this context, but I saw a reference to the signage. There were some concerns about the sporting life sign, and I'm just wondering, has that issue been put to bed?
Director Farr, can you speak to that?
There's some minor details that we're working on around the signage to ensure that it complies with the bylaw, and we're working through those details right now.
Any follow-up, Deputy Mayor?
No, thank you. Appreciate it.
Would any other committee member like to speak to this matter? Mayor Saunderson?
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. I just would echo the sentiments of council that it's great to see Sporting Life and the owner, the developer, moving forward with this building to get, it was an anchor tenant for that area of Hurontario Street. And I also noted that there was extensive discussions with the Heritage Committee in the minutes, so that they made sure that the design was sympathetic to the area and the downtown core and the Heritage District. And I think I saw a resolution passing the sign as well, the signage. So I'm very happy to see the community working together to facilitate this. And we look forward to, it's a very aggressive build schedule. So hopefully it all moves forward smoothly and we can get that tenant active in our downtown core again.
Thank you for your comments. Would anyone else like to make a comment or have a question? Councillor Jeffrey.
I'm the only one left, but I didn't want to be left out to say that I too am very excited that Sporting Life has been able to return to our downtown, and that staff has done a great job of being able to have this in front of us and moving forward with giving them the ability to deal with the conditions after the recommendation to council. So, thank you.
Well, I think it's unanimous. This is a wonderful development. And so I'll just move forward to call a vote. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is P 2021-04, an application for a permit to destroy trees. It's the Blue Fairway Phase 5 and 6 at Cranberry Trail. Director Farr, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a request by McPherson Homes to remove trees on the property that's subject of the current site plan for a couple of hundred townhomes. This property location, next slide, please, is it's kind of in the linking lands between Cranberry Trail East and Cranberry Trail West. And this chunk of land is west of the completed Blue Fairway 3 and 4, which is the site of a condominium townhome development. And it's east of Silver Glen Preserve and related development area in the Cranberry Trail West area. The site plan is in its second submission, and the applicant is seeking to remove trees prior to completion of site plan approval in order to facilitate site preparation so they can deliver units to the market sooner than would otherwise be the case. Next slide, please. This just shows the area of tree removal. Next slide, please. Here's the site plan that's under review right now. We've been working quite closely with McPherson. In attendance at today's meeting is Russell Higgins of McPherson Homes. As you can see, it includes 177 townhouses, 72 apartment units. Next slide, please. So the tree cutting bylaw doesn't allow the issuance of a permit where there's a site plan application underway that hasn't yet been approved. So the bylaw contemplates that this site plan would be finalized, and once it was approved by council, then tree removals could occur. And because the bylaw doesn't allow staff to issue a permit, it does include an appeal mechanism. In this case, we're bringing the request for a tree removal permit directly to council. The timing issue here is that there's a window of time during which you're not allowed to remove trees. This is about mid-April to about mid-August. It's a federal regulation dealing with migratory bird species and it's considered a nesting season. So you don't want to remove that habitat during that time. So there's some, and I think council's seen this before, some anxiety among the development industry to try to get in and do those removals before that opportunity to do that closes. So the applicant does provide an application and a submission for council's consideration. Next slide, please. So as I said, we're waiting for a third submission. We've received ecological studies that confirm that the tree removal can be completed without impact on matters like endangered species or what have you. So the ecological studies have been done. The lands are currently designated and zoned residential, and they're part of a larger draft plan approved subdivision that's being implemented in phases. So the owner is quite anxious to proceed, and he's available to answer questions if they come up, but he's willing to provide a security for tree compensation should they not proceed within a specified period of time. We've had recent discussions about what the appropriate window of time would be within which they'd be expected to perform advancing the development. And the intent of this security is to address directly the concern that's being stated by committee and members of council in the past about where a developer seeks a tree removal permit in a situation where their application hasn't been approved, and then the application goes dead. And then you have a site that is bereft of trees for a prolonged period of time. So the idea of having this security is to try to address that and come up with an appropriate dollar amount to be available for the municipality to draw down if they don't advance the project in a timely fashion. They've also indicated that if they're not able to remove trees before April 15th, it's going to have a significant impact on the delivery of housing into the market. And the next slide, I think, can you go to the next slide, please? Shows you that. So Mr. Higgins took some time to put this together. The details aren't as important as the bolded dates. So if they're able to get a tree removal permit before April, then they can deliver housing by August 2022. And if it's after April, so that will mean beginning the clearing after the bird nesting season closes in mid-August, late August. It adds almost a year onto the delivery of the housing. So next slide. Again, just reminding you of the scope of the tree removals at hand. Next slide, please. So we've presented this here for the committee to provide any comment. We've had discussion with the applicants today, and we're going to have further discussions. And the nature of our discussion today was to talk about implementation details, and that was what's the appropriate amount of security. In this case, you'll see in the report that there's two kind of public goods that staff are putting forward for council's consideration through the recommendations, and that is if the development isn't built in a timely manner, then staff would want an amount of money to draw down to do tree replanting at their discretion anywhere in the municipality. And also because a site preparation is going to disrupt an existing trail access that crosses this property. We have another piece, which is that a temporary trail would be constructed, again, at the applicant's expense through the related security. So we're working on what the appropriate framework is to enable those conditions to be triggered if there wasn't a performance. So we had a great discussion today about some of the options that would secure these matters. McPherson is going to be doing some additional work on this, and our intent would be to try to bring back the missing detail, which is the cost the implementation mechanism and the performance timeframe to council, but it's with all these things that I've sort of generally covered in this presentation in mind. And that concludes my presentation. I just want to remind you that Mr. Higgins is available in the attendee list if you have any questions on him.
Okay, thank you, Director Farr. Deputy Clerk, are there any members of the public who would like to comment on this application?
Yes, Chair Hamlin, I have Matthew Pretty wishing to speak to this item so far.
Thank you.
Just let him in.
Hi, everyone. I may as well keep up here. You know, we need a good connection with, I guess, the public when it's available. You know, we just went through a town council meeting there regarding inventory, as Deputy Mayor Hall had suggested. By the way, Councillor Hamlin, you're doing a great job. I'm happy to see you're at the wheel here. You know, if we need to remove trees in light of expanding need for housing, rooms and whatnot, I'm all for it. I'm just wondering if the developer is available to comment if there's any replacement of birding habitat. I know Cranberry, you know, the west side of town, there's a lot of habitat, birds, you know, there's other water related living you know, wildlife. Would the developer comment about replacing any habitat in and around the site in relation to replanting? Thank you.
Director Farr, is there an obligation on the applicant in this regard?
It's not something that we discussed here, and the mechanisms aren't 100% clear. It's something we can have further discussion with. There is landscaping that's proposed through the development, but to my knowledge, and I know Mark Bryan is on the call as well, we don't have a mechanism in the current tree destruction bylaw to allow for this kind of compensation. Like on another site or what have you. So at some point, this bylaw is going to have to be reviewed and updated to address those matters, because that does appear to be an emergent kind of a value in the community and a concern. I don't know whether if Mark is out there. If there's nothing to add, I wouldn't add anything, but if he has anything to add, I'd invite him to do so.
Mark, would you like to add anything?
Sure, thank you, Chair Hamlin. The only thing that I would add is that with any of these site plan approvals, we do look to try to achieve tree canopy targets. So that is something that we'll look at, but there's nothing that specifically addresses the nature of the canopy or the habitat being provided.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for those comments, Mr. Pretty. Are there any other comments from the public on this matter?
If there's anyone else wishing to speak to this, we have Russell Higgins who would like to speak. I'll just allow him to talk here.
Thank you. Madam Chair, through you, can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Great, thanks. I just want to say hi. Director Farr gave a fulsome account of the reasons why we're looking to expedite the tree clearing on the site. I really don't have anything to add in terms of what Director Farr said. However, I am available to answer any questions that this committee may have with respect to our application.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Higgins. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you.
So what I'll do at this time is I'll read in the recommendation in motion, and then we'll get into committee discussion. That staff report 2021-04 application for permit to destroy trees, Blue Fairway Phase 5 and 6, Cranberry Trail be received. And the council supports issuing a permit to destroy trees to McPherson Builders, Cranberry Limited, for the vacant lands located at the terminus of Cranberry Trail East in the town of Collingwood subject to inclusion of standard permit conditions as appropriate and additional conditions as set out in this report, including that matters identified through the review of the associated site plan application for the subject lands are addressed and resolved to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning and Building Services. That securities are provided by McPherson Builders, Cranberry Limited, in an amount to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning and Building Services to be drawn upon for related compensatory costs for matters set out in this report if the owner fails to apply for building permits and initiate construction with 1 year of the date of council approval of this report. That staff include in the forthcoming Blue Fairway Phase 5 and 6 site plan agreement a requirement that McPherson Builders Cranberry Limited construct the Cranberry Trail, Georgian Trail connecting trail link as part of the first phase of site preparation and or development of the site to minimize the duration of disruption to the existing connection to the Georgian Trail. And finally, that McPherson Builders Cranberry Limited agrees to enter into an agreement or provide a letter of undertaking or similar arrangement as required to give effect to the terms under which the securities may be drawn and to implement the conditions. Would there be a mover for the staff report? Councillor Jeffrey, and a seconder? Mayor Saunderson, thank you. So now I'd like to turn it over to the committee for any comments or questions they might have. Mayor Saunderson.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. Through you to Director Farr. I note that the NVCA approval has not come through, and I'm just wanting to be sure that that approval will be obtained before the tree cutting starts.
Director Farr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll ask Mark to speak to that item. Mark, could you speak on the status of NVCA review?
We have received comments from the NVCA. There was the background study work that is applicable to this portion of the site was applicable to previous phases of the development. And I had a quick conversation with the NVCA on Friday, and they have no concerns with the tree removal.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Mayor Saunderson?
Yes, thank you. And just with respect to the existing water course that runs from the water course, what measures are being undertaken to ensure that that water course is kept intact?
Director Farr, is this for you or our senior planner?
Let's refer it back to Mark there for comment, please.
Mark, can you address that?
Yes, Chair Hamlin. When it comes to the water courses and whatnot, there'd be silt and sediment control fences required. And that is a standard condition that we attach with tree cutting permits. I can have a quick check before it comes back to council to make sure that everything is free and clear, but my recollection is that that the water course is protected and that we have adequate conditions to ensure its protection.
I just want to follow up, sorry, on the previous question regarding compensation and Mark Bryan's comments about the replacement canopy. I think that as a result of that question, staff will go back and take a look at the proposed landscaping plan relative to the tree removals and ensure that in our view and relative to the bylaw as it's written right now, that adequate measures have been put in place to address the loss of the existing tree cover. There won't be a full replacement of that, but we will look at it from a compensation perspective to ensure that the appropriate measures set out in the bylaw are covered.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Any further follow-up, Mayor Saunderson?
Just by way of comment, I appreciate the developer's position and the staff's input on this. We have seen in some past developments where trees have been taken down and the developments have not moved forward. So this does cause, I think, council concern when we see these types of applications, but I'm satisfied having seen the legwork done and the commitment from the developer that they will proceed. And so I wish them good work in getting this moving forward once the trees are down. Thank you.
Thank you. Would any other committee member like to speak to this? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Chair. I will also second Mayor Saunderson's comments in regard to a past history of removal of trees in anticipation of council approval for various development applications and those developments not moving forward with the result that there is essentially a blight on the landscape for many years. And I can name several developments in Collingwood where this has been the case, some of which are still not complete. So this is a deep concern of mine that we would be granting this approval, anticipating that council would approve a development application. And if we do not, then we're potentially in the same situation. And the developers' timelines also reflect council's early approval of this development application, which at this point in time, without having seen it, there is I have no need to assume that I would find the final development application to be satisfactory. It does, this whole application sort of brings to the fore a concern that I have expressed a number of times, that without a private tree bylaw, we're constantly in a situation where we have no standards or protocols of which we can make these decisions. And so I find that we're just too often making them on an ad hoc basis. So for these reasons, I will not be supporting this report.
Thank you for those comments. Director Farr?
Madam Chair, I just want to respond to the comment about the status of the site plan application. So as I indicated in the presentation, we're expecting a third submission, and there's a number of outstanding items that we were looking forward to resolution with the developer. And you can see that there's a reference made to working to resolve anything that remains outstanding right now to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning. Through our discussion this morning, we flagged a handful of items that we were looking for some further work on. And Mr. Higgins assured us that that was something that will be addressed in the third submission. So we will be kind of looking for that through the terms of the agreement and the wrapped up recommendation that comes to council.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Doherty, did you have any follow-up?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The tree clearing does all give us cause for angst, given some of the past experiences. In this case, my question to Director Farr was going to be what triggers our ability to draw down for the tree replanting, but I see it's built in here for 1 year of the date of council approval of this report. So we do have something that will trigger our ability to draw if the developer's not performing, which we may not have had the ability to or missed the opportunity to build in such a trigger in previous agreements. So I will have a question under other business regarding a specific development on Mountain Road, which doesn't seem to be moving anywhere. And we do have money that was to be on deposit for tree replanting. So just as a heads up to staff, I'll be asking about that one under other business. But here I see we have developed a trigger, so I feel a bit better about that.
Director Farr, would you like to comment?
Yes, please, Madam Chair. Thank you for your comments. Councillor Jeffrey, that's correct. That we have identified there needs to be a trigger. And so we're working with the builder on what the best trigger is, whether it's site preparation that becomes a trigger or building permit or both. And we are looking at crafting a development agreement, which is a legal agreement that secures the matters that we're discussing here today. And within that agreement there, like I said, there would be the performance conditions. And then presumably we ultimately wrap the content of that development agreement into the site plan agreement going forward so that there was greater clarity. I guess, it's been helpful to us to have the cooperation of Mr. Higgins in working through these issues. And these are positive kind of reference points for us in the event that we find ourselves in a similar situation in the future.
Thank you for that. Councillor Jeffrey, any follow-up?
Thank you for the response.
Thank you. Would anyone want any other committee member like to comment? Deputy Mayor Hall.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. I actually was going to go down sort of the similar path as Councillor Jeffrey. And so I do have a question or two that I'd like to pose under other business because they are in the negative or contrary, but they're not negative or contrary to this specific application. So I'll do it at that time with your permission. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments at this time? I'll just add, I'm very sympathetic to Councillor Doherty's comments, as we all are. We've suffered a lot in our community with these parcels that have been just left as sore holes for us to deal with. But I am encouraged here. We are dealing with a reputable builder who has done a lot of work in our community. And also I'm very encouraged by the state of the market and the fact there's virtually nothing for sale. So there's lots of encouragement that every builder is going to be going as fast as they can right now. In any event, I'm also wanted to mention I'm very pleased that staff is turning their mind in a very detailed way to this problem. It's very encouraging to hear Director Farr's comments. Right, so I'm calling the vote here to approve this recommendation. All in favor? And opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. All right, the next matter on the agenda, this would be the extension of draft plan approval for the Bridgewater plan of subdivision. And this is item 6.3. So Director Farr, over to you once again to provide the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is this matter anyway deals with an application for extension of draft plan approval for project known as Bridgewater Preserve of Georgian Bay, otherwise known as Consul East. Next slide, please. These are lands located on the north side of Highway 26 near Princeton Shores. The lands are currently, next slide, please, zoned. If you can see the interior of the site, these lands are currently zoned a mix of medium density site specific zones. The current proposal, and there's a road also that has been approved as designated environmental protection, but it allows for a road to be constructed north from Highway 26 to this pocket of land. So there is a set of draft plan conditions that's been around for quite some time, originating as far back, I think, as 2007, 2008. And it's been successively extended over a period of time up until, I guess, it expires in February 26. So it was most recently extended 12 months ago. There's also a companion, it's not a companion, let's call it a zoning bylaw amendment that's been filed by the owner to increase the number of units within that pocket of development that you see surrounded by this hatched land from 320 odd units to something more than 600 units. And that increase in density is a proposal that the developer has argued is viable relative to the maximum density in the medium density zone. So they're looking to basically clean up that mix of site-specific medium density zones and then sort of restructure the zone to something that's more generic and will ultimately, if it was approved, nearly double the number of units in that area. In addition, they have a concurrent revision application to the draft plan subdivision approval that you see in front of you. And that revision application is intended to facilitate the layout of that development in the event they were to gain zoning bylaw amendment approval and approval of their revised draft plan. So over the last year, there has been a little bit of activity on the file. In November, the applicant made a submission that is under review by staff. Staff understand that this is a complex site with a long history, and there are a number of moving parts to it. And so rather than recommend tonight an extension of 12 months, which has been typical of past extensions, we're recommending a 4-month extension during which we would take full stock of the multiple files and the conditions and return to committee and council with basically a more fulsome recommendation relative to this file. So that's my presentation. I expect there'll be a few questions, so I'm glad to answer them. Thank you.
You're on mute.
Thank you, Director Farr. Would there be any member of the public who would like to comment on this matter?
Chair Hamlin, I do have 2 people. Oh, I have 4 people interested to speak. So I'll start at the top of the list. The first one is Mr. Powell. So we'll just let him in here.
Mr. Powell, you're on mute.
Yeah, you have to unmute.
I am, thank you. Can you hear me? Duncan,
Back here.
Duncan Bristol will be making the presentation.
Mr. Powell, you're having technical difficulties.
Yes.
Do you have your phone on too at the same time or anything?
No, it's off. I'll reconnect. Let me reconnect. You go on to someone else.
Thank you. We'll do that.
Okay. So then the next up is Matthew Pretty. I'll let him.
Okay.
I'm just going to mute Mr. Powell until we get that fixed.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, Matthew, you should be good.
Okay. I'm glad Mr. Powell hit the bell first, because he's definitely a senior person on this this site. I would like to recommend on the west side of the Bartlett Boulevard is to construct a berm that preserves the wetland to the left, to the west of that. I suggested that in person at Town Council when the developer and the consultant were present. There are many people at the meeting. It's amazing, like what upsets people and seeing a grander vision. I would like to imagine that the wetland could be preserved. Oh, what's going on there? In some way that you could form, you can berm around the wetland. Oh, hold on. I'm going to turn the speaker off. So at the end of the day, my friends, Mr. Powell in his last comment about, you know, the inlets and different areas that should be left untouched, left undeveloped and accessed. I would say he's right in a lot of ways, but at the same time, you have to propose amicable ways to bridge and mediate where there is development and where you want to preserve and protect and how you're going to do that. So I challenge Mr. Powell tonight to present some type of ideas towards how to be proactive, and to Director Farr, if he could ask the developer or the consultant, if that person's present, could they actually do a berm next to the Bartlett Road to secure and plan for something like that, to secure that wetland so that wildlife is contained and you know, we have some sort of a vision here that's proactive for persons concerned about ecology and destruction of wildlife and the green zone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pretty. Those are comments that staff will make note of. Tonight's not the night to get into that kind of detail. We're just considering at this committee whether to give an extension of the planning approval process at all. But thank you for making those comments. Deputy Clerk Dahl, do we have Mr. Powell back?
I do have Mr. Powell on the line. Are you able to speak, Mr. Powell, yet?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. That sounds better. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. The question that I have, Duncan Bristow will be making the presentation on behalf of Blue Mountain Watershed Trust. And I was just going to make a short presentation, not a short presentation with respects to some, what I think are issues that need to get looked at. Is there a sunset clause on this application?
Director Farr, could I ask you to answer that question?
Sunset clause, the conditions have extended for 12 months. Council is considering whether to extend them for another 4. This would allow staff more time to provide a more thorough recommendation about whether to advance and retain those conditions, to alter the conditions somehow, to allow those conditions to lapse. There's a number of options that are available to council, and those options are properly considered in the scope of both the approval that's in place right now and to some extent relative to the other applications that I mentioned earlier. So there's a number of factors at play as to whether the applicant or the draft plan approval continues as is or in a modified fashion or not at all.
Thank you. Okay, I hope that answers your question, Mr. Powell.
It doesn't. The question I have is there a sunset clause? You could have this thing go on forever. And one of the questions you have is that how it impacts, you know, the planning scene in Collingwood. And I'm not against this thing or anything. The question I asked is there a sunset clause?
Okay, I know the answer to this. The answer is the sunset clause right now is June 29th, 2021.
Okay, thank you. The other issue I have is if I look at the official plan, I think there's an important issue that comes up, and that's with the floodplain mapping. And one of the things that in the floodplain mapping, the concern I have is that we know the water levels now have changed, they're higher. And I think it's really important that matter get resolved by the developer to make sure that with the higher water level, how that impacts the flooding in that area. And that's
Well, thank
something,
you for that comment. I think these are the kind of things that will be looked at if council extends the approval of this, pardon me, the draft plan approval as requested tonight.
okay,
But
thank you.
that's not part of what tonight's discussion is. Mr. Powell, was there anything else you wanted to mention?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Clerk, who would be next?
I think the
Sonia.
CAO has a comment that she'd like to make first
Right,
before we go
thank
on
you.
to the next person.
Yes.
Thank you. And with great respect to the Conservation Authority, thank you, Chair. I wanted to also mention that the floodplain mapping and the assessment of it is the regulatory authority of the Conservation Authority and not the town. So Mr. Powell has a good question. As you mentioned, it will be dealt with later, but not necessarily by the town. Thank you.
Right. Thank you for that clarification. Appreciate that. Deputy Clerk, who would be next?
Yes, Chair Hamlin, we have Duncan Bristol up next, so I'll just allow him to speak here.
Thank you.
Right, Duncan, you should be able to unmute yourself there. Yeah.
Yep. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Yeah, as George mentioned tonight, I'm speaking on behalf of the Blue Mountain Watershed Trust. Our group, as you know, has been involved with this development since it was first initiated, then known as Consulate East. And we reached an agreement at the time with the original developer through an OMB minutes of settlement on July 30th, 2007. At that time, there were 6 items agreed to between the parties. And as far as we can tell, those items are still being adhered to by the current developer, with one possible exception that we'll investigate further. What has really changed, however, and is beyond the purview of our MOS, is the proposed density for this development. We had strong reservations concerning the original proposal, which was about 314 units, but it seems even more certain that long-range ecological harm would result from a doubling of this density as per the current proposal. We believe it would be inconsistent with the intent of the 2007 OMB approval to increase the density by such a large factor. A change of this magnitude will result in greater quantities of human encroachment, automobile exhaust, a requirement for increased stormwater management, noise, light, increased trail traffic, potential off-trail uses, and this represents increased danger to species at risk. There will be more dogs, raccoons, and invasive plant species in what is already an extremely unique and sensitive area. This development is entirely encircled by the provincially significant Silver Creek wetlands. Provincially significant wetlands are the most sensitive environmental land classification in Collingwood's official plan and must be protected from negative development impacts. Excuse me. This proposal effectively severs the direct connection between the western and eastern sections of the PSW. In particular, if Bartlett Boulevard is extended out to 26. It was the developer's contention in a 2018 wildlife study that the habitat of the spotted turtle and endangered species was restricted to the western section of the PSW. There was, in fact, a confirmed sighting of a spotted turtle on May 15th, 2019 on Bartlett Boulevard, which lies in the eastern section, and this was subsequent to the developer's study. This sighting would indicate that severing the connection between the western and eastern sections of the PSW could cause harm to this endangered species habitat. We would therefore strongly encourage both the town and the developer to study this issue further and do everything in their power to ensure the continued continuity of habitat for the spotted turtle in this area. We're incredibly privileged to be home to this amazing shoreline wetland area and have a significant responsibility to preserve it for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bristow, for your comments. Deputy Clerk, would there be someone else who would like to speak?
Hi, Chair Hamlin, there is. There's Larry Young, who's also here, so I'll just allow him to speak.
Thank you. Mr. Young, are you there?
Oh, sorry. I got too many buttons clicking here.
Hmm.
Great, Mr. Young, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Try that.
There we go.
Am I unmuted?
Yeah,
Yes,
good.
you're good to go.
Oh, great. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Larry Young is my name. I'm a resident at 100 Bartlett Boulevard. And I, like many of my neighbors, support the undertaking of the Blue Mountain Watershed Trust and their endeavors to protect the Silver Creek wetlands and the habitat therein. And like Mr. Pretty mentioned earlier, we do recognize that development is going to happen and need to be practical about things. But one thing I would remind staff and council is that this will be the 7th extension since the original draft plan was approved back in 2007. So it's been an ongoing effort, and I can only imagine the time and energy that's been expended by staff and council to bring this development to whatever position it is right now. I know when there was a public meeting on the zoning bylaw to request an increase in the density, there were many opposed to it. I was one of the people opposed to the intensification, possibly for different reasons, but I do want to ensure or ask staff and council that the integrity of the community be retained, that this development, however it does proceed, is going to be a community unto itself, and the amenities that go along with that community of, I'm not sure how many people would be involved, but regardless of the size, the amenities be sized and accommodate the expectations of the future residents. And that whatever services are being provided, the engineering, planning, take into consideration the benefits or the well-being, I guess, of the neighbors and the community at large. That's all I have to say, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Young, for your comments. Very appreciated. And is that all, Deputy Clerk?
I'll just call one more time. Anyone else wishing to speak, if you can please press the raise your hand button at the bottom. There's no one else wishing to speak, but there is a question in the comments section that says, is there a reason council keeps extending this controversial development and not ending it? So I'll just...
Thank you for that. I'll just offer up the answer. That's the purpose of this debate this evening, but thank you for the query. All right, before I turn it over to the committee, I'm going to read in the recommendation that staff report P 2021-05, extension of draft approval for a plan of subdivision, Bridgewater, preserve at Georgian Bay be received, and that council extends the draft approval for the proposed Bridgewater plan of subdivision for a further 4 months, that would be to June 29, 2021, and that council directs staff to continue to their review of the draft approval and bring forward a further recommendation report dealing with the development proposal prior to the June 29, 21 lapse date. All right. So can I have a mover and a seconder for this staff report? No. Yeah. Councillor Jeffrey, thank you. Would you move that? And a seconder? Mayor Saunderson, thank you. And now for the committee, would anyone like to add their comments? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Chair. I will just begin by declaring a non-disqualifying conflict of interest as I am a volunteer on the Blue Mountain Watershed Trust Foundation Board of Directors. But I will participate in this conversation because that membership does not preclude my acting or making decisions independently of the trust.
Mayor Saunderson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As you pointed out, the discussion tonight is really about whether we extend this draft plan of subdivision, and I am in favor of approving it for 4 months. It does not increase the density. It allows the developer to push forward with their planning processes, and then we will adjudicate those planning processes when the time when they submit it, which would be within 4 months. So I am in favor of the extension, and I look forward to dealing with the subdivision.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I will be supporting for all the reasons the mayor has just outlined. I think the crunch time will be in 4 months. I do have one question though. This file is probably the only thing at this meeting older than me. But there was at some point that there were EP lands coming to the municipality in this. I didn't read it anywhere in the report. I was just wondering if that's still on the table at some point in the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Farr, would you like to answer that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Jeffrey, there's a significant body of lands to the west of this property and surrounding it that are currently designated environmental protection. And I'm not entirely clear on whether there's been a transfer of ownership of those lands or not. I am sure that'll be one of the questions that comes up when this comes up again in a few months.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Councillor Jeffrey?
No, thank you.
Anyone else like to speak to this? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. Through you to Director Farr. What would be the implications? Well, actually, I'll start by confirming once again that the application that we are being asked to extend is for the original OMB negotiated development plan at 320 units, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. What would happen, what would be the implications if it were not extended?
Director Farr?
Through you, Madam Chair. One of the reasons that we're looking for the extension is to take stock fully of this draft approval and also understand the relationship to the other applications that are currently under review, the zoning bylaw amendment and revision application. And we want to have a full and complete understanding of all of these so that we can provide, I guess, what you call more conclusive recommendations to council. So at this time, I can't give you a fully scoped assessment of the implications of not extending the draft plan conditions at this time. If you did not extend them, they would lapse and they would not be in effect. But I can advise you that we have consulted with our solicitor as to the recommendation that we've made this evening. And we think that it's more beneficial for council to have a complete picture of the status of all the different moving parts associated with these lands when they consider sort of the fate, I guess, of the current draft plan conditions.
Thank you.
Follow-up, Councillor Doherty?
Yes. So at the present time, we have no sunset clause or sunset duration for approvals of site development plans. Is that correct? They can go on indefinitely.
Director Fark, would you like to answer that?
Sure. Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Doherty. You mentioned site plan. You do
Plan of subdivision.
Plan of subdivision.
Yeah.
Plan of subdivisions can be extended by council when they reach their the deadline of the draft plan approval conditions. So there's a sunset clause is embodied in the lapsing date that's set out in the draft plan conditions. So what we're doing here is we are extending that lapsing date for 4 months to allow committee and council to have a more fulsome review of the implications of their decision as it might be at that time relative to the conditions.
Okay, my apologies. I probably didn't ask the question properly. I guess what I'm trying to say is there any mechanism at which we can direct we can decline any further extensions to any particular applicant?
Director Farr?
Yes, there's a variety of options available to council as it relates to how draft plan conditions are handled and whether or not they are extended. They can be allowed to lapse, but there are other options, and those include adding conditions in conjunction with the review of a request to extend, leaving the conditions as is. In this case, the recommendation is to extend for 4 months, and then when assuming that this recommendation was approved, we would return and make a more conclusive recommendation to council, either extending them further, updating the conditions, or speak to the question of lapsing or not.
Thank you. And among those activities for this 4-month extension, would there be a requirement, or would there be a request going forward for additional studies relative to this development, seeing as it is now almost 14 years old?
Director Farr?
Through you, Madam Chair, Councillor Doherty. As I said before, our intent with this file is to take full stock of where it's been, or where it's headed, the various different issues, the status of those issues and the developer's response to those, and come forward with what we were hoping will be reasoned advice to council as to how to act. And if as part of that review, the notion or more studies is contemplated or to be recommended, then we'll raise those options at that time.
Okay, thank you. That being the case, I will be inclined to approve this request so that the planning department can continue with their investigations.
Thank you for that. Would anyone else like to speak to this matter? All right, so I'm going to have my say here at the end before we turn this over. I'm going to not be supporting this recommendation. I feel that a 14-year-old plan of subdivision in this state is what I might call a dog's breakfast. And I heard, of course, our director saying that he and his staff will spend a lot of time opening up all the files on this, try and figure out what's gone on and give some direction to the developer. And in my own view, it's time for the developer to do that work, and he should be hiring his own consultants, and they should be pulling this apart, having a look at it, deciding what kind of studies are needed, and putting them into the municipality with a new application. The Planning Act allows councils to set terminations or lapse dates on plans of subdivision of not less than 3 years. This has been going on forever. And why I call it a dog's breakfast, I think what I know about this is there was an application, there was an appeal to the Ontario Municipal Board, there was an agreement with residents, there was extensions, and then there was a little bit of money spent to redraw lines on a plan to double the density, and then there was extensions. And then I believe what I understood is there'd been very little work done over the last year since the last extension. And I say that there's no need for us to spend any more money as a town on this. It's time for the developer to step up. And lastly, I also believe that this plan should be redrawn with the full benefit of any official plan policies that I know we're going to see, to bring robust environmental policies that we currently don't have in our official plan to the attention of our developers, so that our plans can be done properly and with all the current best practices in mind. All right, so with that in mind, I'll bring the matter to a vote. All those in favor of the extension? And those opposed? It will just be me, and that carries. Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda would be item 6.4. It is PW 2021-02, 2020 Annual Water Compliance Report. Director Slama, would you be making this presentation this evening? Deputy Clerk.
If I could just make a quick comment, I received a notice from Manager McGinnity that the date in the recommendation should be February 28th as opposed to March 31st.
Just a minute here.
For the report to be posted on the website.
Okay, what was that date again?
February 28th.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. We do have Manager of Environmental Services, Heather McGinnity, with us this evening, as well as Compliance Officer Marie Richardson. So I'll turn this over to Manager McGinnity to begin this presentation.
Thank you.
Hi there.
Hi.
I'm actually, thanks Peg, or Director Slama, actually with Marie Richardson, our compliance officer. She's here this evening. This is her pride and joy, shall we say. It's quite a lot of effort to put together this report every year. And so she's here to present our an update on our drinking water system to council and committee. So I'll let Marie speak to the report now. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Marie, are you there? Deputy Clerk, do you have Marie Richardson there?
I see you're there now.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I had a little technical issue. Thank you, Madam Chair. The annual compliance report, actually you can change forward the slide. Thank you. The annual water compliance report is comprised of 2 reports required under the Safe Drinking Water Act, and specifically Regulation 170.03 drinking water systems. It covers the 2020 calendar year, and the regulation requires the report to be posted on the town website no later than February 28th, 2021. So some highlights from the report. There were 2 incidents of adverse drinking water tests in 2020. Both were low chlorine residual in the distribution system. So the minimum required is 0.05 milligrams per liter. And in one incident in September, it was 0.04 milligrams per liter, and the other in December was 0.03. So both were found during regular monitoring of dead ends in the distribution system, and the mains were flushed immediately to bring up the residual. The Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit and the Spills Action Center were both notified as required under the regulations, and they were satisfied with all the actions taken. So the monitoring frequency has been increased while we're investigating the use of auto flushers to keep that residual up in the distribution in the dead ends to prevent a recurrence. There were no incidents of non-compliance noted in the ministry inspection for the 3rd year in a row, so we received a 100% score. It should be noticed, however, that the adverse events this year occurred after the inspection, and they will be reflected in the score next year. All of our chemical and bacteriological sampling results showed everything was well within the required limits, and most results showed none detected. So the capacity of our system is set in the municipal drinking water license based on the physical capacity of the plant, plus the ability of the plant to meet all the disinfection requirements. Our maximum day, the day with the highest usage of the year, was at 79% of our capacity. Overall water use was down 1% from last year, primarily because of the pandemic lockdown in the spring. April actually had the lowest usage since 2003. Usage was higher than normal in June as the industry started to ramp up production and then leveled out for the remaining of the year. It should be noted that the low usage you can see in 2017 was due to an unusually cold and rainy summer. So each year we complete a management review of our quality management system. The QMS is comprised of 21 elements that include all facets of water operation and management. So a summary of some key items from that review are included in the compliance report. So one is the internal audit of our system. It was completed by an experienced consultant this year, or last year. We had one minor non-conformance and 8 opportunities for improvement. This year, we were due for an on-site audit by the accreditation body, NSF, but it was changed to a remote audit due to COVID. So there were no non-conformances identified by the auditor and 2 opportunities for improvement. Based on this audit, the town of Collingwood has therefore been granted accredited operating authority status for another 3 years. In spite of the best laid plans, emergencies can happen. Our emergency plan identifies possible emergency situations such as equipment failure and extreme weather events, and lays out a plan for recovery and mitigation. A section of the plan is tested each year. So this year, our test was the pandemic. It was a good test of our preparedness and our ability to respond to a complex and a rapidly evolving situation. We further needed to coordinate our departmental response with corporate directives. We were able to develop a new flexible plan to allow us to move quickly between tighter or lesser restrictions as the need arises. In terms of level of service, non-essential services are being provided when they can be completed with minimal risk. So that means, for example, the tasks that can be completed by one person can be done in even the tightest lockdown conditions. Tasks that require employees to work closely together are postponed in times of lockdown. But all essential and emergency work is being carried out. We just use additional PPE and distancing protocols where possible to minimize the risk to employees, contractors, and the public. The number of main breaks tracked over time provides an indicator of the integrity of the distribution system. This year we had 7 main breaks, mostly in the older cast iron material. It was an unusually mild winter last year, and that may have contributed to the lower number. Our backflow prevention program entered its 4th year in 2020. The total number of premises compliant with the program is 519 out of 634, or 82%. That's an increase of 10% over last year, despite the program being put on hold for parts of the year due to the COVID pandemic. So in conclusion, the town of Collingwood continues to provide a safe, reliable source of potable drinking water to our consumers and continues to meet or exceed our legislative requirements. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that presentation. Are there any questions or comments for the public on this?
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. If there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this report, can you please raise your hand feature? It looks like there's no one wishing to speak at this time.
Okay, thank you. So I'll read in the recommendation. The council receives staff report PW 2021-02 and approve the 2020 annual water compliance report. And the council directs staff to post the 2020 annual water compliance report on the town's website by February 28, 2021. Can I ask for a mover of that staff report? Mayor Saunderson, thank you. And a seconder, Councillor Jeffrey, thank you. And I'll open it up to the committee. Would any member of the committee have any comments? Mayor Saunderson.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. Congratulations to staff, third year in a row with 100% rating. That's fantastic. And so congratulations to all of you, and for catching the residuals in the end lines. I did have a question. There is mention in the report about backflow prevention. And I'm just wondering if one of you could take us through the backflow prevention program, what it's for and what harms it's preventing.
Thank you. Who would like to do that? Okay, Manager McGinty. Thank you.
Sure, I'll try. I'll let Director Slama fill in the blanks that I miss. But this is a very important initiative that the town has undertaken, and I think it shows great foresight both on staff and council's part to implement this program. It's been highly recommended by the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks as a preventative measure to prevent contamination from sources that are connected to our drinking water system. So typically we're focusing on ICI, so industrial, commercial, and institutional uses, as well as multi-family residential. So focusing on potential contaminants that could enter our drinking water systems should a low pressure event occur in our drinking water system. So what would happen is essentially the chemical or material or something that is connected to our drinking water system could be sucked back into our pipes by this pressure reversal. So almost like a straw. Putting in these backflow prevention devices creates a seal, a barrier, so that when that low pressure event occurs in our distribution system, that blocks off, so there's no potential for any contaminants on these private properties to be sucked back into our distribution system. So it is a very proactive program. It's only appreciated in situations where they don't have them in place. So example, in town of Stratford, I'm sure some people may or may not have heard of this event where car wash, I guess soap, the cleaning detergent that they use at the car wash was sucked back into the distribution system in the town of Stratford. And they ended up having pink drinking water that they had to flush out a significant portion of their distribution system over a period of days. So, you know, if they had a program like this in place, that could have been prevented. But you don't appreciate it. No news is good news with this type of program, right? So, you know, I you know, being new to the town, I look at what has been done in such a short period of time and getting it up to 82%. And I think they've done a tremendous job of getting this program in place.
Thank you for that. Mayor Saunderson, any follow-up?
No, that's exactly the answer I was looking for. And thank you very much. And again, congratulations to staff for that excellent result.
Thank you. Would any other member of the committee like to comment? Okay, seeing no comments, I'm going to put the matter to a vote. All those in favor of accepting the report and recommendations? Thank you. Opposed? Carried unanimously. All right. Okay, next we're moving to reports and minutes of other committees and boards. The first one being the Collingwood Heritage Committee. Give me a second here. So I'll read in the recommendation that the minutes of the Collingwood Heritage Committee meeting held January 18, 2021 be received and recommendations contained therein be approved. Can I have a mover and for this? Thank you, Councillor Doherty. Seconder, Mayor Hall, Deputy Mayor Hall. Would the Standing Committee have any questions or comments with respect to these minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? And opposed? Carried unanimously. The next report would be that of the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority. This is the board meeting highlights, January 22, 2021. Could I have a recommendation? I guess the recommendation I'm asking for is that the minutes of this meeting be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved. Could I have a mover for that? Deputy Mayor Hall, and a seconder, Councillor Doherty. Thank you. Any comments? All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, the next item would be the consent agenda. And I would be reading in that Council herein received the general consent agenda, and further that the information and opinions provided in the general consent agenda items are that of the author and are not verified or approved as being correct. And what we have is one item, the NVCA letter, Resource Protection Committee, replacement of municipal members. So before I turn that for discussion, could I have a mover, please? Councillor Doherty, and a seconder, Councillor Jeffrey. And would anyone like to comment on this matter? Seeing no comments, all those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, carried. Now item 9, we're having a departmental update. That would be from the Economic Support and Recovery Task Force, their dashboard update. And Director Farr, I see this is over to you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It gives me a great pleasure to introduce to you tonight our new Economic Development Manager, Brennan Kenny. I'd like you to welcome Brennan. Brennan comes to the town with 10 years of experience in economic development work, most recently with the town of Innisfil. Brennan, Martin Ridlow, and I have been working together with other staff through and our other partners in the community, orienting Brennan to Collingwood, and it's been great so far, and I know Brennan's really excited to join us. Brennan's going to be working and continuing many of the successes that council has directed and that the town has gained over the years, and embarking on some of these projects identified in the Economic Development Action Plan. And I find him to be a really thoughtful, energetic, and great addition to the team. He's continuing with his work here that we've been doing with an update to the dashboard that we'd set out, which was so great, and providing a kind of overall point in time snapshot of where we are. So with that, I'll hand it over to Brennan to say a few words and then get into the update. Brennan?
And Brennan, I just wanted to say on behalf of the committee, welcome to the town of Collingwood. We look forward to working with you.
Thank you very much, and very happy to be here. Thank you again, Adam, for the introduction. I'm going to give you guys 2 to 3 minutes of content here very quick. And I do want to say off the bat, I mean, the town has, COVID is a challenge for all towns. In Innisfil, we're dealing with obviously something very similar. And the town has limited control on certain things as well, right? I mean, the town doesn't have control over the length or the severity of lockdowns, for example, or what the province is going to put in or take out in some cases, as we saw the Premier mention today. With that in mind, economic development, you really can only do, 3 or 4 different things, retain your businesses, expand your businesses, help new entrepreneurs to start up and attract businesses to your community. And largely you can do that through programming, you can do that through infrastructure, and you can do that through policy. And I hope to bring some background and some experience into all 3 of those to the town of Collingwood. Moving over to the dashboard, you all have it in your agenda, so I won't go through it line by line, but I did want to discuss a couple of items in there and take any questions you may have. It is day 6, so I may not have all the answers at this point, but happy to get those into the future for you as well. So one thing I'll note is permit activity, building permits is actually up year over year, though the value is pretty similar. So we are seeing the market respond, and we are starting to see a Development and Operations Committee is a good place for this, because you're seeing development applications still come forward, even though we're dealing with COVID-19. From a power perspective, this is largely, on a consumption basis, as we expect, hospitality and education being down in this period. And you're looking at December 31 numbers. We have had a peek into January numbers. And hospitality and education with a further decline. And we are seeing industrial actually go up. And that's not unexpected. Industrial had minimal restrictions as part of the lockdown, as part of the stay-at-home order. So nothing super surprising there. I did want to note unemployment data, and I do want to add a quite large grain of salt to this data, being that the loop that we're included in includes large cities like Barrie, Kitchener, Waterloo, and Collingwood's size comparatively obviously doesn't make a huge dent into those numbers. There is a second set of numbers that's included in there that includes Bruce County, which our labor task force regionally does feel is a little bit more representative of Collingwood, though those numbers aren't substantially different when you compare the two. And I'll close on real estate, which is quite interesting, and I know our deputy mayor has quite an interest in this. Sales are down. If you peek into the January numbers, which you don't have in front of you, they're actually down 44%. And that's not a super surprise. There is a supply shortage, I think was noted earlier in the meeting. And frankly, there's a difficulty in showing houses right now and showing real estate, especially as we start to see this influx and continued influx, frankly, from the GTA, the regions which are the most hardest hit from COVID, have the most restrictions. And frankly, there's likely a lack of comfort locally from having people come up and view homes or view residential properties at this time. I will note, though, as we leave the micro and go to the macro, that 2020 was the second highest home sales year on record. So, there is continued strength. And frankly, if you look a little bit ahead, into the weeks to come, into February and March, I do think you will see a rebound there. The initial lockdown that happened, March, April, May, responded with very significant June numbers. And I think something similar will happen here. Obviously, we're in winter. That was in spring, a little bit different, but still something to note. And then just to close for the benefit of council, just a reminder of a couple of the great programs that I'm walking into in Collingwood. Digital Main Street, which has wonderful success and has been supporting our Main Street businesses, mostly retail and service, which have really struggled in the pandemic, depending on the business you talk to. We are seeing significant funding flow through to our businesses from the Center for Business and Economic Development. And I'm very pleased to note that funding will be fully subscribed. And they did get 2 rounds of funding so far. So a great success there. And we are having, through our Small Business Enterprise Center, ongoing consultations with our business community. And we are starting to see that there is, that resilience, that recovery, but also survival. And that is really critical here. You may hear my puppy in the background. I apologize. So to close, essentially, we are here. There is a really strong team built at the Business Development Center that I'm walking into. I hope to support them over the long term and also to support council in your goals as well. And I'll turn it over for questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that report. And I'll turn it over to the committee. Would anyone like to comment or have any questions? Deputy Mayor Hall.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. My question actually is through you to the CAO with regards to staff policy. My understanding was that with staff policy, if you were going to have something in the backdrop, it had to be either of the Buffalo Bills, perhaps the Montreal Canadiens, but certainly not the New England Patriots. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I think we definitely need a full report next meeting. Would anyone else have any questions or comments? Nope. So you did a great job, Councillor. Yes, CAO Skinner.
Thank you very much, Chair Hamlin. I probably should make comments about the only things you're allowed to have in the background are the Collingwood teams, but the Blues and etc. But I'll tell you my real comment, which is I'm very encouraged by the work that the COVID Economic Recovery Task Force did. And I think that having these statistics presented to you on a regular basis and available to staff is a tip of the iceberg on the kinds of monitoring that I'd like to see us do as we have resources and are able to line them up over time to give us like a true understanding of our own community. So I just was excited to tell you how encouraged I am by seeing things like this coming before you that are impartial and an indicator of the community. Thanks.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for pointing that out. All right, would there be any other additional items staff would like to bring up to the standing committee at this time? Yes, Deputy Clerk.
I believe there's 2 more updates that have been requested. The first one would be through Director Slama's team with COVID wastewater testing that's currently taking place or going to take place.
Oh, very interesting. Thank you, Director Slama.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. Yeah, Manager McGinnity is going to speak to some testing that we're doing at the plant.
Yes. So we thought the council would be interested to hear about this new program that we're participating in. And it's based on some scientific studies that have shown that people with active COVID-19 infections shed the virus in their stool, sometimes even before symptoms start. So this has prompted the international rise of wastewater-based epidemiology, or WBE, to monitor the presence of coronavirus genetic material, or RNA, in wastewater as another screening tool to help identify the community spread of COVID-19. With Ontario in the second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, the province is exploring ways to monitor the presence of COVID-19 in a community, even if people are not showing symptoms. As such, the province has decided to invest over $12 million in wastewater surveillance initiative in Ontario. And they reached out to the town of Collingwood to participate in this program, where staff will collect and submit a weekly wastewater sample for analysis for the coronavirus RNA. So this program will allow healthcare professionals to track the increasing or decreasing trend of COVID-19 in Collingwood and implement proactive controls if required. If the program progresses, sampling frequency from the Collingwood wastewater treatment plant may also increase to up to 3 times per week. So we're very excited to be participating in this innovative program and doing what we can to help the local healthcare professionals respond to this global pandemic. So thank you.
Well, good for you and your staff for being part of this. Are there any questions from the committee? Well, I have a question. When will your results become known to the public?
As far as I know, they're not actually being made publicly available. They're just being used by the public health professionals at this point to try to gauge how the COVID, transmission is happening within the communities.
Okay, I have noticed other communities' results.
Oh, are they
published in the paper? So perhaps it'll be up to our, local health.
Sure, that's something I can definitely look into.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
And who would the second report be from, Deputy Clerk?
The second one is coming from Executive Director Culver and Director Slama.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Chair Hamlin. So engineering and parks staff have been moving forward to advance the continuity of active transportation along Huron Street with the trail, the path, I guess the trail path being underwater for the last few years. And then this summer we cleared some area along Huron Street. I'm talking across from Park Bridge, the Park Bridge development, to allow for just kind of a path, right? A pathway. So we thought that it would be worthwhile to provide committee with an update of our plans for this year. And Executive Director Culver is has got a presentation. He's going to do most of the talking, but we're both here to answer any questions if you have any after.
Thank you. Over to you, Dean Culver.
Thank you. Very weird that I'm doing most of the talking. Doesn't happen. And also, I think this is my first guest appearance at the other committee meeting. So it's nice to know it looks very similar to my normal committee meeting.
Well, welcome.
Thanks. Through you, chairs, the So the Huron Street sidewalk is what we're talking about. And Stephanie, if you can go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to show a map in a second, but this facility was originally known, or has been informally known as the Secret Trail. It runs around to the north side of Sunset Point. And about 3 or 4 years ago, water started impacting the trail, mostly on the northmost reach, but as the water levels rose, it started to affect the southern parts of the trail as well, adjacent to Huron Street. So in 2018, we had to close it periodically, mostly because of the north reach and the wave action that was impacting it. But as time has progressed, and up to last year when we had to kind of close it all together. And then as Director Slama mentioned, we had an increasing public, what's called a desire line. So this is the line, this is how they tell us where they want to go, by walking there a lot and leaving a line. And so we knew that this was getting more and more use along the side of Huron Street. And again, in conjunction with Public Works last year, they did a lot of the heavy lifting and cleared up some of this ground on the side to create a bit more of an even granular trail, allowing people to follow their desire and get to the Sunset Point. And then also, as you're aware, Huron Street was widened to 5 lanes and to allow for what needed to happen to develop Park Lane development. Park Bridge development. And I think you're obviously very aware as well that trail or path is the only north access to Sunset Point. There's with the Secret Trail closed, we effectively for periods of time effectively didn't have a way to get there, which theoretically forced people to the south side of the road and then to cross somewhere along from the south side, which we all know is not ideal, a little dangerous, and people didn't want to do it, so they created their desire line. It's also highly traveled by visitors and the Environment Network EnviroCamp when that's on function, which has somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 kids. So really, this has become a pretty important connection between Sunset Point and the community. Again, next slide, please. So this is the trail we're talking about. The red line indicates the sidewalk treatment that we're recommending or that we'll be pursuing. The yellow circle actually shows where some of the water impacts were that caused the trail to be closed last year. If you go to the next slide, please. And just to sort of complete the story, the top circle is that northern reach I was speaking of, which is damaged by waves and actually for large periods last year was completely underwater. We also had some impacts on the trail in the section between the bridge and that north reach. Next slide. So here's some pictures I actually took this morning just to sort of show the view. So we're going to be creating a sidewalk that continues this sidewalk that runs in front of the courthouse, roughly the same distance from the curb and straight through the area in front of us. The middle picture shows to the left, again, the yellow circle indicating where water has impacted the trail in the past. The third picture on the right shows looking back towards the courthouse. And I'm actually standing on top of the water culvert that helps outflow stormwater. Next slide. So we did consider all of the alternatives. Could we raise the trail? Could we do any number of other treatments that would maintain a trail? Because trails off-road are ideal and sidewalks, while extremely functional and purposeful, don't have the same cachet as trails, at least coming from the PRC guy. Public Works might have a different view. But we did look at all the different alternatives and just came to the conclusion that with the uncertainty of water levels, with the impacts to wetlands that would be required, if we raise the trail, that creates a gradient fall away from the trail, which is going to have a further impact on the wetlands. And that we could create something unique on the sidewalk with some future phases, which I'll describe in a second. And so we decided that the sidewalk would be the right way to go. We're going to remove the asphalt trail so that we can allow for some replanting in the wetland area. We're going to require some tree removal, but which is actually sort of what triggered this update, because we need to do this before nesting season. So we need to do it in the early part of the year. The The trees that would be effective are largely ash, which if you go down there right now, you'll see most of them have marks on them from the tree study, which showed that they would be become hazard trees eventually anyway, if they aren't already. And poplar species, which are not a species at risk. So we'll be taking away, I believe it's about 6 meters from the curb. So if it's not a significant amount, but you'll definitely notice. But obviously we'll be looking to replant as we can. There's a 2-meter boulevard planned. This is needed for snow storage in the wintertime and to allow the trail to remain clear, the pathway or sidewalk to remain clear. We have begun conversations about whether this would be the opportunity for things like raised planters that have been discussed in the past for the medium boulevard, which are not possible. But in this case, they may be. We have to check in and see if that's an opportunity, but it'd be maybe a way to make a distinctive sidewalk experience for people. We've also discussed the idea, I'm not sure it's listed here, but we've discussed the idea of a walkout point somewhere about the midpoint where the culvert is, so people can step off the sidewalk, potentially have a bench experience and view the wetlands and have that next to nature experience. Again, just to create something a little bit better or more of an experience than a simple sidewalk. It will be 3 meters as much as we can. There is a section adjacent, or as you get really close to Niagara, that can't be 3 meters. It just, the boundaries won't allow for it. But the rest of it will be 3 meters wide to make it a multi-use trail. There's a 3-1 grade required to establish the sidewalk that'll be stretching into the wetlands. Yeah, so I think next slide. And again, so it's a 3-meter wide trail. One of the considerations that helped in making the decision to go to a sidewalk is that the secret trail at night is actually very dark. And so for safety and whatnot, it's actually not a bad idea for us to have this sidewalk. It'll provide for more illumination at night. It won't be prone to flooding. It'll be able to be cleared year round with the sidewalk plows in the winter. And the cost was approved in the 2021 capital budget. And we've actually also submitted an application to ICIP for supported funding for it as well. I believe that's it. And if there's any questions, Director Slammer or myself would be happy to answer.
Okay, thank you for that presentation, Director Culver, or maybe your Executive Director Culver still.
Just Dean. Dean is easier.
Okay, Dean. Anyway, members of committee, would anyone like to pose any questions or have any comments? Vice Chair Jeffrey.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. A comment really. I see all the good points in Dean's presentation, but I've been walking, 5 or 6 kilometers a day, and I go along this stretch almost every day, and it's kind of a spot where you can feel safe from the traffic. And, even the other side of Huron Street is just, for me, is a scary walk, and I will default to the side streets because the traffic isn't moving in a calm manner, I guess, and that's not the sidewalk's fault. But they also don't respect people walking on it, and continually seems like they move over closer to the curb so they can splash you. Seems to be a sport. But anyway, I see the common sense of it, but I really like the secret trail. It's kind of, I look forward to getting there and feeling safe and enjoying a little bit more of nature. So that's just my comment.
Okay, I see a response being requested.
Yeah, my apologies, because I did leave out one important piece, which is I don't think it's a full help to Councillor Jeffrey, but the stretch that runs south to north from Huron Street will actually remain. So we're not going to lose the entire secret trail. We're losing the east-west trajectory, but the north-south trajectory we're going to leave intact. And when the waters recede, we're going to take another look at how to restore the trail, excuse me, that north reach and the area to the rear of Sunset Point that allows for, again, that peaceful walk that people do appreciate. So we're only taking out the piece that is just literally impassable by water and prevents people from getting to Sunset Point the way they want to.
Thank you. That's helpful to know that. Was there a follow-up, Councillor or Vice Chair?
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Jeff Doherty.
Thank you, and through you to Director Culver. I share Councillor Jeffrey's comments about what a pleasure it is just to walk along that secret trail, and how in some ways how unfortunate it is to lose it. But I'm glad to hear that we're not losing all of it, and certainly. Having had to travel both ways this year, that widened sidewalk is definitely required. And as a cyclist or a pedestrian, it's very difficult to get from the courthouse to Sunset Point. So kudos for that. I love the idea of potentially raised planters and some benches, and that will certainly add to the charm of that particular stretch. And finally, with the trees, is there an opportunity to replace those trees perhaps across the road or even along the boulevard to the west of that area, so in front of the courthouse and in front of Sobeys? I know that there are some boulevard trees, but not very many. And just wondering if we can use some of the trees that we have been so generously offered to replace those that we would be losing.
Yes, through you, Chair. So if I may, I think staff needs to do a bit more investigation about what's appropriate to do, and certainly, excuse me, boulevard trees and trees provided by Julie De Lorenzo are, I mean, they're super valuable, and we want to make sure that they're used and we take full advantage of and meet with the intentions of the donor. I think when it comes to the replanting of the trees we're taking out, one of the things we talked about is what might be a good replacement in the wetland area. It's not an easy plant, and it's not an easy thing to understand is what will survive there and what would thrive there. But we'd like to take some time to understand that, to see if we can actually help the wetland out as well. So we're gonna take all of that, including your comments, under advisement, and do some analysis and figure out what the right strategy is for replacing what's being taken away, if that's okay.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I have one. One advantage of the secret trail was for those cycling and coming from the west, you could get down to Sunset Point without having to ride on Niagara Street, which is so busy in the summer. So by maintaining that extra piece, the northerly piece, I think you described it, of the trail, will that allow cyclists still to stay off of Niagara Street to get down to Sunset Point?
So through yourself, so in the short term, the answer is no, because that trail is still compromised by the high water levels, and the current predictions for the next 6 months look like we're only going to go down a few inches. It's not going to probably drop enough where it would make feasible sense for us to restore that trail at this time. But the water is dropping, so that's a huge encouragement, because for a long time we didn't know if it would. And then, but when the time comes, we'll take another look at how we can restore that trail and what the right idea is. The biggest challenge there is that north reach, because it faces directly north-bearing winds and north-bearing storms. So a few years ago, I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago, we put in some concrete block to hopefully hold back, which a year prior would have been fine because it held back sort of the lapping water that was eroding the trail. But once the water went up and the waves started to overtop the block, it just took the trail away. And so it didn't make sense for us to continually restore something that Mother Nature wanted us not to have for right now. So we're going to take a look at that as the water drops and see what the right thing to do is there. But the intent is for that trail to remain. We understand it's a high value, and for one of the reasons that you mentioned is taking people off at Niagara Street. But it is also a really lovely trail, and it's got a nice bridge that's in good condition. So yeah, we'll want to maintain it as best we can when it's appropriate to do so, but probably not until the water drops a bit more than what's projected right now.
Okay, so I'll just leave you with this thought. You know, last summer with it being closed, of course, the cyclists were on Niagara Street. And because it was so busy, a lot of them were on the sidewalks with the families and the carriages and oh my God. So I'll just leave with the thought whether it might be worthwhile setting up, you know, a few signs pointing the cyclists to another route to get down to Sunset Point by, of course, just going a little further east. The roads there are a little quieter. Anyway, okay, well, thank you very much for that report. There's no input you need from us right now, I take.
No, we just we wanted to make sure you were aware because trees will be coming down, and we know that that's always upsetting for everybody else included. But we thought it would be best if the committee was aware, and that makes the public aware. But you'll understand that there's a project underway which will improve things.
Okay, well, thank you for bringing that information to us.
Our pleasure.
Okay, now Deputy Clerk, are there any public delegations this evening for our committee?
Yes, Chair Hamlin, I have Matthew Pretty wanting to speak. So
thank you.
We'll just let him in here. All right, Matt, you should be good to go.
Okay. Let me just test this. Let's do some. Excellent meeting. Another double day of meetings. That last project review, fantastic. I do share that concern that Chair Hamlin has, and it's at that corner. I've walked it a few times where immediately it's important for people to take an immediate left up Niagara Street into oncoming traffic. Because when you cross over Niagara, there's people that are turning into Niagara, or they're at the highway and they're about to turn onto Niagara. The pedestrian light will be important. It's difficult, and I think more signage. You actually the key is with Town of Collingwood is to create the signage and that new yellow triangle, the warning signs. I saw that through Harborview Park. Fantastic, good job, Director Culver. I guarantee that was you that did that, and that's really good. Those are sharp. Things like that are important, showing like wayfinding that are like that yellow and white is illuminated with the silver of the plate. You know, keep working on that. Keep working on those cautionary signs. The amount of tourism to Sunset Cove Park is extraordinary, as everyone's learned more and more. My question that I formulated earlier is bridging engineering and planning tonight regarding Harbor Road, Heritage Road, that second section near the boat launch. Will that be paved this year? Someone was mentioning about the telephone poles going up, Heritage Road being replaced. Someone's like, oh yeah, don't waste your time with that. I'm like, I read on Facebook, I'm like, oh my God, like, you know, there's so many mixed reviews, it's hilarious. But the traffic, the intensity of traffic needs to be really understood. Is anyone interested in renovating the terminal elevator as of yet? And are we going to see road improvement along Harbor Road, Heritage Road? I prefer to call it Harbor Road. I don't like the name Heritage. It brings up a white power sentiment that just annoys me. This question is for both Director Slama first, and then Director Parr after, with regards to that property in relation to, is anyone taking interest in the private-public partnership and the road that needs to be continually improved? And I'd just like to finalize with just leaving the note for Director Culver, PRC Director. just continue with those signs. Like, good job. I noticed those yellow signs. Like, that's really great. And down by where the boat is too, if there's not signs there already, that's being finished now. They did such a great job at shipyards. Like Councillor Hamlin was saying, the continuation of that path from the west.
You have 2 minutes, Mr.
Okay. Well, I'll max out here. And I think the other thing is yeah, painting the trail, looking at wildlife protection, such as like, you know, considering turtles and wildlife, birding, that we're not too close to bird areas, like, you know, with dogs and things. It's funny with people's dogs, they sort of run right into the water. There's the swans and the ducks, and oh my God, that Birch Street boat launch is out of control. I think we should establish some signage down there, you know, like aware of wildlife. Oh my God, is that ever hilarious? Did anyone see Roma Asof's photo of the ducks going through the ice openings? Like it was like a roller coaster. I'm like, is this even real? You know, and it's just amazing. Like, that whole shoreline's grand. Good presentation, Director Culver, the sensitivity to the habitat, protection, like Deb Doherty said, you know, along that area, and Councillor Jeffrey, yeah, it should be protected, maintained. Shrubs, that sitting area, bang on with the lighting. Excellent job. I'd like to ask Councillor Chair Hamlin if you could pass it over to Director Slama regarding that Harbour Road, all that traffic and chaos and uneven surfaces. And then the big bango is the elevator from Director Parr. You know, what's the story there? Do you have any advancements there? And I wish everyone good luck in the upcoming construction season. It's going to be a big one. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for your comments. We'll, you know, keep those in mind. I'd like to move on now to the, is there any other business that committee members would like to bring forward? Yes, Vice Chair Jeffrey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as I alluded to earlier, there is a property on Mountain Road on the south side, just before the glass plant. It was going to be developed, I believe, or is going to be developed, I'm just not sure, into the cannabis manufacturing development there. So I'm just wondering, it doesn't have to be for this evening, but when I was speaking about triggers for the money, there was money put on deposit with that development, and the applicant did agree at the time, I know because I was chairing, that those funds could be used to replant that property if it wasn't going to go forward. So maybe we don't have the trigger for that, but I'd just like to maybe have some follow-up on the status of that.
Director Farr, are you able to respond to that tonight, or is this a matter you'd like to report back on?
I think it'd be better if I reported back on that. I could just provide an update generally, send it out.
That'd be great. Thank you. Was that all your other business?
That was it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Chair. And I just would like to direct this question through you to Director Slama. I received a complaint today in regard to the crossing at the Hamilton Drain, our signalized crossing at the Hamilton Drain across Hurontario Street. And that cars, even though the lights are flashing, cars sometimes continue to barrel across the crossway, the walkway. I have heard these in the past from time to time. I'm wondering if you have, and if so, if if you have any thoughts as to possible remedies for that particular problem.
Director Slama.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Doherty. So yes, we have heard those kind of comments in the past as well, and we have had some discussion within the engineering department about, you know, options with respect to that crosswalk or crossover. And you know, our position is it is a newer style, And it is, by the kind of technical manuals appropriate for that road, but we understand, right, that sometimes reality is different than theoretical. So in our discussions in-house, our thoughts are that crossover has been in place for just over a year. And we have included in our budgets, though, in saying this, I'm trying to remember if it was approved in our budget, like looking at crossovers in other areas of town. So at this time, we're thinking, we need to have a bit more experience in Collingwood before we might move to change that. But in saying that, we are aware. We appreciate the concerns being brought forward. It helps, remind us of the attention that we need to pay and the considerations. And it is something that, we are talking about and considering opportunities, but at this time, we're not recommending any change.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Hall.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. If I could, I apologize. I think I have made this comment before, but I'd just like to make it again. And that is that I appreciate that the signal at the Hamilton Drain is MTO approved. And this was a design that they came up with. I have to be honest, I haven't seen it in a similar environment. I've seen them in use in a more, I'm going to say, residential setting where the street is perhaps narrower and is flanked by sidewalks, et cetera. So it's got more of a fixed design with curbs, et cetera. And I think by default, curbs, et cetera, just help to slow down traffic. But the part of the design that I just have never understood, and this is prior to seeing it here in Collingwood, this goes back to even the other type of design that's got the more traditional arm that goes across with the X, is the fact that the MTO continues to promote and use a signal that uses yellow versus red. Anybody who has received a driver's license in the province of Ontario since whenever has been raised on the fact that red means stop, amber means proceed with caution. And I just think of other signals, for example, rail crossings without arms, for example, are red. They're not other colors. And so I guess I just, that's one point that I just have never understood. Does it prohibit us from changing a design element? And is it as simple as even replacing and putting in red fixed bulbs versus the amber?
Director Slama?
Through the chair to Deputy Mayor Hull. So we've also had these discussions in-house, and as possible, CAO Skinner might be able to provide some comments as well based on her previous work experience. But, at this time, we wouldn't recommend suggesting deviating from an MTO approved device. And I think that's, whether we agree with what they have approved or not, at this point, when we've thought about it, we don't want to deviate from those standards, which, have been based or established, right, through their protocols. So I don't know if CAO Skinner, you might have something else that you could add to this.
Thank you, Director Slama, and through the chair also to Deputy Mayor Hull. There is quite a bit of science that goes behind how these are designed, everything from tracking eye movements to norms in Ontario. The regulations for enforcement are written to correspond with the types of signals. The signals are chosen based on the volume of traffic, the number of lanes, the speeds of the area. And I think that there's a certain amount in fact, a prohibitive amount of risk to, as a municipality, unilaterally make a change to what I know MTO is expecting to be the norm for drivers. Although I see your point on the yellow versus red lights for sure. I think staff could endeavor to take some actions like to check with the committees that do the updates of these standards just to see if there is anything changing so that we could be proactive around those types of activities. And so if you could just leave that with us, we are aware of the concerns that you've stated tonight, but wouldn't recommend acting alone in the short term.
Any follow-up, Deputy Mayor?
If I may, and CAO Skinner, you started with saying based on the science, and that puts me in a bad spot because I was raised to believe in the science. So I don't want to challenge that. That said, though, on High Street, which is also a busy street, maybe not as busy, just a gut, we do have a signal, though, that is the traditional traffic for pedestrian use only. It's not for vehicular use. And my understanding is that the crossing at Niagara Street is going to be the same traditional signalization, but with the three lights or three colors. I guess then I'm just maybe asking as a request, and knowing that the two of you have inherited this design, and this was a previous staff that through council's direction put this in place. But I would be interested to know what the replacement cost would be to put in a traditional signal for pedestrian use using the three colored lights, similar to what's on High Street and Chamberlain Crescent. And I'd be interested in knowing what the cost would be of taking the current system that's in place, decommissioning it, and perhaps putting it somewhere else that could be utilized in a more urban setting. Sorry, not urban, but residential setting, so that it's not just simply being thrown out, so to speak. It would be repurposed, and so I guess I would formally like to maybe ask if we could get those numbers, and then it would just. I fully appreciate the position of staff, but the concern that's raised tonight has been raised so many times, and I think it's incumbent that council has the information in front of us, and if it's an expenditure that we feel is maybe justified, then we can make that decision. So if I don't know if that needs to be an official motion or just a request, Chair Hamlin, but I'd like to request that those numbers be provided to committee for further discussion.
I'm so glad you've raised this tonight, Deputy Mayor Hall, because I think
it's Councillor Doherty that raised it. I'm just
piggybacking.
I'm just piggybacking.
Oh, so glad you raised it, Councillor Doherty, because I think all of us worry about that crosswalk, and anyone who's in that area regularly, and I am because I live in that area, just, it's terrible to see cars go through the intersection not seeing the pedestrians. So on a procedural basis, Deputy Clerk, do we need some guidance from this committee to staff to have a report of that nature come back to us?
Yeah, if the committee is asking for direction from staff, then it should be in the form of a formal motion.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Hall, do you want to have a go at that?
Please, I would just formally request that staff report back to this committee with costs to replace the existing lights at Hamilton Drain with, and I'll use the comparison, a traditional light as installed at High and Chamberlain, and the potential cost to decommission and redeploy the existing lights somewhere else within a more residential environment. And that would be it.
Would there be a seconder for that motion? Councillor Doherty? Okay, any comments? I'll put it to a vote then. All in favor? And opposed? And it's carried unanimously. Thank you. Is there any other business? Deputy Mayor Hall.
Thank you. I just wanted to go back. I was going to speak to and sort of piggyback on Vice Chair Jeffrey's question with regards to the development site on Mountain. And I was wondering if it was alluded to during the Bridgewater presentation that there are multiple sites throughout the community. I can think of 2 or 3 that were passed during the Council of 10 to 14 that were cleared. In some cases, they've regrown and have been cleared again. And yet the properties sit dormant. In fact, one site in particular, which is a huge site, is on 26 East as you're heading out of Collingwood toward Wasaga Beach. And the property is back on the market. There is no intent on the part of the applicant, the original applicant, to proceed. They've made that very clear. And so I guess what I'd be interested to find out from our planning staff is that as it relates to some of these prior decisions, are there any, and I'm not looking for any response tonight, it would be a future conversation, but as it relates to some of these prior decisions, is there anything that this council can do to rectify what has already been done?
Okay, thank you for that. Director Farr, is there any response you'd like to provide at this time to that question?
No, through you, Madam Chair, Deputy Mayor Hall, thank you for the question and appreciate it. And we'll follow up and kind of just in the flow of things into the future here and revisit as required. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Yes, Deputy Clerk.
Sorry, Chair Hamlin, I was just double checking the procedural bylaw because I had forgotten about a change that was recently made with staff reports. So 24 hours notice is required for a staff report. So we could put it as a notice of motion on the agenda at the next council meeting, if that's okay.
Would that be going to council or back to this committee?
I could put it as a notice of motion on the council agenda.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other business? Seeing none, we are moving to the last item on the agenda, number 10 or number 12, adjournment. And Vice Chair Jeffrey, thank you for that. And thank you, committee. We did a lot tonight. And that's all for tonight. Oh, we have to vote. We have to vote for an adjournment. Okay, all in favor. Sorry, thank you and good night.